Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Reclaim TV. It's been a minute since, well, I think we streamed last week, but it's been a minute since I've been on the stream, and I'm super excited. I've been looking forward to this for a long time. So joining us today is Larissa from MSU, and more specifically, or more particularly from Knowledge Commons. Larissa, you and I met up, I think for the first time. God, I hope for the first time. Otherwise, I'd be very embarrassed. At Open Ed 24, where you talked a little bit about Knowledge Commons and your role sort of on the team, talking about the social media strategies and engagement that you've used to build community. And you also mentioned at the time that Knowledge Commons was in the process of transitioning between the platforms that you guys were using. And I thought, wow, all of this is amazing. I need to go make her say all of it again in about 2 months, maybe 3. So thank you so much for agreeing to do that and for being here today.
Yeah, I'm thrilled to be here. And yeah, I can confirm, Pilot, that was the first time that we met was at Open Ed. So
Okay.
unless both of our memories are synced wrong, but I'm pretty sure that was the first time. So,
Okay, good.
So yeah. And I know also I'm like, I got to try to remember what I said, 3 or 4 months ago, but I'll do my best.
No, don't worry about it. Yeah. I've been, like I said, I've been really excited about this, but I figure we can maybe sort of just jump on in. And Larissa, if you want to talk a little bit about Knowledge Commons, what it is that you guys do and the communities you guys are trying to build, for anyone out there who is not familiar. We can start maybe there.
Sounds good. So yeah, so my role at Knowledge Commons is I'm the user engagement manager. So my work is sort of split in 2 directions. One of them, as Pilot alluded to, is more of the outreach space, which is I do our newsletter that we send monthly to our users on what's going on at our platform. I do our social media, a lot of the things that are sort of in that business development communications realm. And then the other part of my role is in more of a user support area. So when people ask questions about login or registration or how to use the site, usually they're directed to talk to me. I also work very closely with our project manager on things like user documentation. So my role is sort of split in those 2 directions that seem kind of disparate, but have a lot of connections around just connecting with users and making sure that they know how they can use our platform. So Knowledge Commons also, for those that may not know, so we have really about 5 key areas of our site. So all of them are in the space of academic professionalization and also just knowledge sharing generally. So the first kind of main thing that happens when users sign up is they get a profile, which is where they can update it with their information about where they work, blog posts they've written, stuff like that. And some of it is stuff that users enter, and then some of it is populated as they go and they use Knowledge Commons more. Mm-hmm. Then we also have an area where users can create hosted WordPress sites for free. So we have some limits on themes and plugins, but users, if they have a site that they want to create on their portfolio or project, they can do that there. We have a groups area of the site, and that specifically is a more small group collaboration space where there's a discussion board and there's the ability for users to connect in a more personal way versus like a site that's like, hey, look at what I'm doing. I have this cool project. And then we also have we do run a server on Mastodon, which I know like we follow Reclaim and stuff on there, which is fun. But we run hcommons.social. And then as you mentioned, Pilot, we now recently moved to a new repository system. So our previous repository was called Core. Had been in place on our platform since the Commons launched around, I think it was like 2012 or 2013. And then since this past November, that has been completely reworked into what we're calling KC Works. So it still is a repository, but it has much more functionality, a lot more that users can do with it. And essentially at the end of the day, share their work in a way that is open access to anyone. And so I know we'll talk about that section in particular a little more, but that's like your Commons crash course right there.
amazing. You guys do like just really incredible work, and also on so many different fronts is what I find extra cool. Just the sheer degree of things that you guys are doing to just highlight people's work and make it more visible and bring people together is awesome.
Well, thanks for that. Yeah, I mean, I feel like definitely one of our values as a platform is like, especially making space for scholars that may not have the sort of traditional background but want to share and be involved. We have a lot of independent scholars that use our platform because, those traditional sort of academic-y spaces don't have a place. And then we also have, as I mentioned, like all these different functionalities within the platform people can use, which I think is also very valuable because sometimes you might have something that is like a syllabus that goes in a repository, but then you have a project that you want to talk more about on a website. So there's a lot of different stuff that kind of goes on there. That's pretty fun.
That's great. Well, so you've sort of alluded to, well, not alluded to, you fully mentioned it. But talking a little bit about user engagement and user support, do you want to maybe talk about just that was the focus of, I think, your presentation back at OpenEd 24. So in the spirit of making you re-give this presentation, do you want to talk a little bit more about that and what kind of strategies and thoughts you guys have on bringing more people into the fold, I guess?
Yeah, for sure. So when I took over my role, so I started working at MSU, which actually I should also like just contextualize, like Knowledge Commons, we are mainly a grant supported project, but we are institutionally hosted by Michigan State University. So all of our team, although we are a remote team and a lot of us are located in Michigan, but we're spread throughout the world even. So Michigan State like hosts us, and so we're institutionally led in that way. Our project director, Kathleen Fitzpatrick, brought us over to MSU when she started working there. But so when I started in about April 2022, so we had, over the years we had some social media and user communication things happening, but it was not necessarily, there was not a lot of strategy behind it. And same to some extent with user support. We've always had an email inbox that before me, our project manager, Bonnie, who actually also did a Reclaim session like this. So like go back and watch the recording to hear from her. But she would usually manage that herself. So when I started working, it was very much like we want to sort of bring these two pieces together and have more thoughtful work around community and making sure we're reaching out and spreading the word about what we do. So when I started, we at that time, I think we did have a Twitter account. I don't really think we may have had a Facebook, but I don't think it was very active. But we were, very much social media was not something we were really talking about as a place we were going to be communicating with users. But then when Elon Musk first bought Twitter, we were in a space of like, we want to create a more healthy alternative for users. So let's create a Mastodon server, which, as I said, is now a really active space.
Mm-hmm.
As of the last time that I looked, I think we have about 1,000 users or so on our server. It may even actually be more than that at this
That's
point.
amazing.
Yeah, so it's really grown. And we've seen like a similar thing actually on our LinkedIn page too, of like, we decided to get involved in that space. And a lot of what I talked about at OpenEd too, I know like Pilot, which inspired this talk, was how we've really tried very much to be thoughtful about what spaces we're using on social. We still have a Twitter, which is there is still some of our users that are still on there, and that is where they're getting our news. But now more and more LinkedIn and Mastodon are much more active for us. And so on that front, like I try to use our social on a regular basis to talk about what we're doing and when we have updates on the platform to share them. On the user support front, when there are service outages or something is not working, it also has been a good space to just get the message across there. And one of the challenges with the platform itself is that there is not a sort of central area where we can post about things. So like knowing a lot of people are on social or Like, I know for me, if I'm on another website and it's just not working, like one of the first places I'm going to go is social to see if they've posted something to say, hey, there's an outage or there's something going on. So it's like, that's where it's sort of fallen in the middle for me. Obviously with what's going on right now, I can't say we're going to stay on Twitter much longer. I just don't know at this point, and now I know more people are on Blue Sky. So in that social world, it's always shifting, which is challenging when you're in the space that I am, where I work with a lot of grad students and undergrads that do stuff even to help with our social media. And then it's like, well, do we need to stop doing it in one place and go to another? So it can be crazy.
Yeah. It also makes me think about just in general, the way that Twitter used to be just this big, big space for community and connection. And a lot of the, just as sort of Twitter's entered its decline, I've seen a lot of people going, well, this is a bummer, but two, this is extra sad because of how much knowledge and information is stored on Twitter in a way that is kind of ephemeral, especially if the platform starts to just go down the tubes.
Right.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. And I feel like it's hard too, because it used to be like every company was on Twitter, every academic conference and, org had a Twitter page that was active. And that was where they were saying, go there to talk to your people. And now, because it's become so fragmented, like, as I said, like we've seen a lot more of those sorts of conversations we used to have on Twitter on our Mastodon. LinkedIn has been a little different just because of the way it's designed. It's not as much of a communication back and forth platform. It's much more announcements.
News. Yeah,
exactly. It's much more news focused, but it's tough because like, it used to be, even when you were at a conference, like Twitter was the place to use that conference hashtag and find people. And now it feels sometimes like a lot harder than it.
Put your handle in your bio. It's so fast and easy.
Right. Like, exactly.
Just find me.
Yeah,
and,
for sure.
Yeah. Well, I do want to do a quick digression into, you mentioned in your presentation making memes.
Oh, yeah.
I would be remiss if I didn't let everybody know about the memes.
I think you would be. And honestly, the memes have brought a lot of joy. I know even in the presentation, I could tell people love memes, So part of, and like, as I mentioned, one thing that when I started working with our community team on sort of revitalizing our socials, one thing we all really agreed on is we wanted to be very authentic in our social media. A lot of times when you're like, there's sort of this line when you're in like kind of that PR space of like, I need to be professional, but also like social media is really the place that even I think brands that are more like they have some fun with it, they poke fun at even themselves, are more effective. And so our team was very just like, we need more memes, we need more GIFs, like we want to have fun. And so a few of the things that I talked about in my presentation were our Open Access Week campaigns, where we've tried to sort of every year around Spark's Open Access Week. So for those that are not familiar, Spark is an organization that does a ton of amazing work around OER and open access and whatnot. And they every year at the end of March do a big Open Access Week where platforms around the world do sort of special events and stuff around just bringing awareness to what open access is. And so we had decided one of those years, like one of our goals is going to be to get more people to add things to the repository, which at the time was still the core repository. And so our team crowdsourced some memes. If you scroll way back to October in our socials, you can see them. I think there's been also some others thrown in as well, but we found a meme generator online and we just had fun with like, the Bernie Sanders, like, I am once again asking you to upload really stuff to core or you to support us for sustaining membership or whatever. And that was like, I will acknowledge that I did a lot more of the memeing than others on our team. However, it was not just me, it was our team in general. And it's just a lot of fun. Like we definitely, tried to make it where it didn't feel too serious. It was just very much about like getting people to check out our repository. And from the stats that we had, it was actually a very successful campaign in terms of driving traffic to the repository and to the site. And so that has been definitely something like we've tried to keep going. It's tough because I, in a lot of ways, don't have as much time to do all the social work I would like to do. But even with some of the students I work with, they've done some stuff with memes as well, because it seems to be something people like to see. And let's be honest, like, we love memes.
Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking about like the thing that I would, hypothetically worry about would be like going, oh man, Open Access Week, it seems so cool. Is my work like good enough? Do I really feel comfortable? Like, part of the point is like joining in, but like, I want to have something like that's good enough. These people are also smart, like, well, and not that memes mean you're not smart, but they mean like going, oh no, these people are here to have fun. These people are here. I can have fun with this too. I don't have to be my most like buttoned up, perfect self for people. There's Bernie Sanders memes here. I can have fun with it. It's great.
Right, exactly. And that has been really a big part of what I've looked to do, is like, how can we bring in people to find our platform that, as I mentioned, like, are not necessarily like, even grad students and undergrads and independent scholars that are not like, they may not have a journal article to add to our repository, but they may have an amazing syllabus, or they did a research project as an undergrad that was, really solid work that they want to be shared. And so that was part of when we were like, we don't want to just be that sort of like formal voice of Knowledge Commons, quote unquote. Like, we also want to be the team behind Knowledge Commons that has a lot of fun with making memes and like sharing the work we do. So yeah, it's great.
I love that. Yeah, I'm just thinking about like, I don't know, just particularly the idea of like, as an undergrad, the idea of like, you're doing research work that you're really, really proud of, but like, is this going to go anywhere? This is maybe something that I can use to get into grad school or something like that. But, in the wider world, is this going to, yes, it can go somewhere. There is a place for the work that you do. You should be proud to put it out, and you should feel welcome and excited. And
right, for sure. Yeah. And like, our new repository is also like such an upgrade on the old one, because there are much more for context for everyone. So when we moved from core to what is now called Casey Works, one of the big things was that, it's based on a different system than the previous one, which is built on Invenio RDM. And our lead developer on that project, Ian Scott, has done a massive amount of work to even customize what Invenio has as a great sort of first step into what works for our users. And like, one of the benefits of the new repository is that users can add multiple versions of a work. And so, like, for example, if an undergrad has written a paper, maybe as their senior project or something, and then they decide that they're going to go on to grad school and rewrite that paper into like a thesis or something, they could hypothetically create a version of it and then show that sort of trajectory of like, here was the first version, here's the second version, here's the next one.
That's really great.
Yeah, which is, it's something we had already had a lot of discussions with users along the way, and versioning was always something that came up because of the fact that, a lot of work, it tells a story. It's not just you write the paper and you're done, or you write the journal article. And so it's really cool that we are able to accommodate that now in a way that we weren't before. And another thing that's also really neat about the repository is that everything that's added receives a DOI, which is a digital object identifier. It's basically just a specific URL that will always link back to that work. And so we get a lot of situations, as I said, where people have a syllabus, or even like they've written a journal article where they did some interviews and they have permission to publish the interviews, but the journal article obviously cannot have those interviews in them. And so then they can link back and show like, here's more of this research that I did that's really amazing. And then they can show the connections. So it's like, there's so many contexts where it is really helpful. And I think it does the discoverability part, especially for grad students and even undergrads who have done amazing work and want to share it, it's so much more accessible now than it used to be. And so it's really exciting for the opportunities it provides.
That's really, really wonderful. And yeah, I'm just thinking about, like, when you said versioning and these permanent homes, and I went, yeah, this makes a lot of sense. And then what you're saying of, like, the idea of, here's something that I can't fit into my journal article. Please come find more of my work. Please keep learning about this. Feels like, I don't know, you're building something big, and you're helping people build up. I don't know. I don't know what I'm saying. I'm just excited. I'm just happy. This is cool as hell.
That's great. Yeah, for sure. And yeah, I mean, we're super excited about it too. When we, this was a huge project to undertake, this repository work, because and there's so much of it that also, like, on the surface, there's so many parts that people wouldn't even know about that have to happen behind the scenes. One of them is, like, related to the identity management piece, which meant that, obviously when users log into the Commons, they have a profile where their stuff gets added. But what happens when they log into the repository, where those works also need to show up on Commons profiles? And so stuff like that was work that our developers worked long and hard to get just moving, because it is so nitty gritty. And so it took a while to really get us up and running, but it's been really exciting in my role, particularly because as I mentioned, I'm the one that talks a lot to users about their projects. And so we used to, with our old repository, be in a space where sometimes people would have a project or something, and it would be, it would have maybe a pretty large scale amount of storage space they needed, or it was something with versioning, and it'd say, this is a great project, love what you're doing, probably not the best fit for Knowledge Commons. And now with the new repository, it's less and less of that for me. And it's more like, yeah, this sounds amazing, what you're doing with setting up your journal or using a collection or whatever. Like, here are some ways you can do this. So it in a lot of ways, it's very cool for me, because instead of having to be like, this is awesome, we can't really support it, or we can do this, but we can't do this. Instead, it's like, yes, please add it to our repository. Like, we want to get it out there. We want people to find it.
That's really great. I know I always feel, not that it happens all that often, but I would feel very, very sort of frustrated to have to tell someone, your project is too cool for us. Your project is too big or too ambitious. Like, the ability to say, what you're doing is great, and we can make a space for you here, is such a wonderful feeling. And I'm really, I don't know. New platform is also just exciting. So you've talked a little bit about the new sort of affordances, versioning, and being able to host these bigger and grander projects. I don't know, grander, but these larger scale projects. Can you talk a little bit about what the process was like of, I guess, deciding to change platforms and what that ended up looking like? I know, particularly maybe for you from a user support perspective, what it looked like to work with people and get ready for that change as well.
Yeah, for sure. And the process really started, I believe it would have been about 2 years ago. It was shortly after I started working. We received grant funding that really funded the project getting a redo. And so as I mentioned, our lead developer, Ian Scott, has been working tirelessly to get things into a place where users can use them, as I can now. But so it really started with our team talking about, what is our minimal viable product? What are the things already that we get out of the box from Invenio RDM that are good? And then what do we need to get it to the next step for what our users have now? Minimally, what we all agreed as a team is we don't want users. can't talk, it's still
it's morning. So
exactly, not losers.
winners.
Don't quote it. It's not that. So what are our users getting that they already have a lot on core, but like what is the next step? And so at that point, we also had our UX researcher and our project manager and myself involved in that process of sort of gathering user data along the way. We also knew already, as I mentioned, from out of the box what NVIDIA would give us. And so that in a lot of ways encompassed sort of the full development project of like knowing we're already going to get a lot of these things, then what can we make sure that users are not losing as they're in the process of like switching over to a new repository. Now, my work in particular with users has meant that I also worked very closely with our project manager on all of the documentation on how to use this repository, which, as you may imagine, is a lot because, anytime you're going to a new system, there is always going to be like anytime you add a new feature, you're always going to get questions about it. You're always going to have people that want to know how to use it. This is a totally different look and feel. And so if you've like seen the before and after pics of Core versus KC Works, like it does not look the same at all. And so what our process looked like with that is I spent a lot of time myself just sort of clicking around the system before it had gone live to understand how does this work? What does it look like? And I tend to kind of approach a lot of these things as I would as a user, as well as a user engagement manager, because I always feel like the questions that I have and that are the first things that come to mind.
That's what people are.
Exactly. Like what other people are going to have too. In general, and there's a certain level of that you cannot anticipate because people will find ways to do things that you never imagined they would, or break things in a way that you never thought could be broken. But I very much was like, okay, I don't understand how versioning works. So let me do a test upload to the repository, go through the process, see what works, see what doesn't, and just write it down and add screenshots in as I go. And so I also was lucky to have a lot of assistance from our project manager, Bonnie, as well as an undergrad student who worked to get those guides up on our support site. But that for me is a lot of the process of just like the documentation piece, because it's like, once I get in there and work with the system, I can see what is going to be something that's very intuitive. What are things that users are not going to understand? Now, on the more marketing side of things, it's a little bit different because it's more of like spreading the message that we have this new repository. And in particular, the like number one thing is like telling people their existing work is all going to be migrated into the new system.
Don't panic.
Exactly. Because a lot of times, exactly with that thing of like, we have this new thing. It's like, okay, great. But what happened to the old thing? Like, where's my stuff? And so everything, we had at the time we had about, I think it was about 28,000 core uploads. And now it has, since the new year, we've now had over 30,000.
I'm just going to mute so I can swear for a minute. 1 second.
I mean, really, that's like, and that was also our developers behind the scenes going, oh my gosh, we have to move over all this stuff. But
it's terrifying.
It's a lot. And again, they did an amazing job of getting things moved over very smoothly. And we, of course, once we launched, there's always a few bumps where things have not migrated, but in general, like generally fairly smoothly. And any user account that had things that did not migrate got fixed very quickly. So yay. But yeah, I mean,
congratulations.
Thanks. But yeah, as you can imagine, like that's a lot of digital items and data that needs to be migrated over. Metadata that was coded into the form needed to be moved over. So that is for me, like the biggest thing we needed to communicate of like, if you have an existing account, your stuff will be there. And if you don't see it, fill out this form on our KC Works homepage because
please tell us.
Exactly. Like, please tell us. And again, I really like big shout out to the team because our UX researcher did a lot of work to create a form in Qualtrics that when users would say, hey, all my data is gone, was communicated back to myself and our project manager and our developer to make sure we were coordinating on talking to them about what happened, getting back and forth. So it's like that, it's again, all that behind the scenes stuff that if the migration goes well, then we don't get a bunch of emails from people saying my data is gone. And luckily it went really smoothly, but it also meant a lot of upfront just planning on the team front of these are the questions we're going to get. This is what we need to communicate. What do we do to handle XYZ? And so it's been a really fulfilling process, but it is also very scary. And I know it's scary for users too, because they're like, oh, this interface is completely different.
Change.
Or, exactly.
Oh, no.
Change is hard,
Mm-hmm. Well, it sounds amazing and terrifying, and also like particularly in the context of making this form and being ready to help people who are having issues. You're doing a whole bunch of extremely necessary work that you're hoping will never be necessary.
Exactly. And that's always the funny thing with guides and with my job in general, because especially on the support end, if I'm not hearing from people, it's usually a good thing because they're on the comments, they're able to do what they need to do. Things are like, okay, great. If I'm hearing a lot from people, it can be really overwhelming because it's usually like, hey, this thing is broken, or my deposits did not migrate from core to Casey Works,
Mm-hmm.
So it's like this weird balance of, you want to hear the positive things, but also it's like, you also kind of want to hear the silence because sometimes it means things are going well. The balance of that is, of course, if you're not hearing from people, then it's like, are people really using the platform? But we have definitely seen an uptick in the number of uploads to Work since the migration. So that means we did things right and people are liking what they're seeing. And also it's challenging too, because the work is not done. Like our developers on that project are still going to be throughout the coming months and years adding new functionality. So this is just the first step really. And then you have to just be ready to anticipate whatever comes your way.
Yeah, I think you mentioned that the platform was in beta in November, December.
Yes. Yep. So, and it was very shortly after Open Ed that we went into our public beta. And so we're calling it a public beta because there still will be changes that users will be seeing. And even once we're not in beta anymore, once we move to version 1, it's still will also probably change a bit. But there were some very key functionality that's on a larger scope that is coming up, including like a shortened upload form. Right now, our upload form is really detailed, and it's great because people can add in all the many more fields than they used to before. At the same time, some people do want a little bit of a shorter version because they don't necessarily need to have as much detail on their stuff. And so like stuff like that, that's going to be still a major change, not as much as it was to move to a new platform, but still a big enough change to the experience is still upcoming. So that public beta, I believe, is going to be launching sometime at the end of this year. But in the meantime, like we still are using our newsletter and our socials to communicate even just smaller fixes and changes to how things work.
Yeah, of course. And that goes back to also what you were saying about not that Knowledge Commons is necessarily going down, but like making sure that you're getting news out in a place where people will look for news. Where if they're having issues, weirdly enough, the first place they go might not be the site. It might be, well, maybe they posted about this on Mastodon. I should go check Mastodon. Making sure that change is visible in lots of places, or visible, acknowledged, announced. There we go.
For sure. Yeah. And our email newsletter has also been a really successful space for spreading the word. And that was, I launched our newsletter, I think it would have been August of 2023. I think it was around that time. And that has seen also a lot of growth in that. Like we are having solid read rates on the newsletter. And, of course, when you have those little ways you can track analytics, like always helpful. And we have found that newsletter has really found a very solid audience where the read rate of it is very high. And so we're trying to use that also as a place, like it's very different than social because we're not sending an email every time there's an outage. That's going to be more of those quick fire short updates. But if it's something that's a larger scale, look at all these changes we made to KC Works in the last 2 or 3 months. Like the newsletter is a place to go. So for me in my role, it's also about, again, finding those audiences that are sometimes overlap, sometimes different in different platforms. Because there are people that will just look at their email and read about it. And there are other people that are on social, or people that are in both those spaces and sort of trying to find it all in all the places. So it can be challenging, but it's fun for me as a content creator because I enjoy playing with different styles and seeing what works and what doesn't in different sort of ways of writing things.
Yeah. I think also it sort of goes to the frequency that you think people are going to sort of, like you say, like people who are looking for news really quickly will probably go to social media. I know that for me, for newsletters that I'm subscribed to, I really don't read newsletters that come out once a week or more. A once a month newsletter, I'm like, oh, it's these guys. I haven't heard from them in a while, but I bet they'll have lots of information for me. Open that, read it once, as opposed to once a week. I go, really? How much new stuff have you done in the past 7 days?
I know we wish like we were, a large enough team that we could be like, oh, every week, like we have a major new feature announcement. Yeah. And I know like we on the community team talked very much when we started talking about launching a newsletter, like we don't want people to feel bombarded with hearing from Knowledge Commons every day or every week, because like, I know I'm the same way of like, there are certain brands that I get emails from like once a day, even twice a day. And I'm just like, I don't need this. Like, it's way too much. And I don't unsubscribe because it's like, I want that one email a week or a month, but I don't like, not even once a week for a lot of them. It's like once a month, I need an email. That's it.
Yeah.
And so in a way, that's also really been a part of our, of how we've thought about the newsletter is like, we want people to be excited to see it in their news or in their inbox once a month, because, and that's very for our team also doable, especially since I'm usually the one that does all the work on it. It's like, I can do a newsletter once a month. If it's more than that, it's a lot. It is a lot of time.
Kind of unsustainable.
Exactly. It's unsustainable. And that's the other thing, even with social, it's hard when you're on a small team because it's like, hypothetically, if you want to beat the algorithm, it's like you have to be posting all the time. And we try to post regularly. We usually, I would say, have 3 or 4 posts a week on our socials, but it's impossible to be doing it like multiple times a day, all day, every day. Just not enough resources there.
Nope. I do have to ask, just as an aside, what platform is your newsletter running in?
So we use MailChimp for our newsletter. We have another platform that we use for our larger scale user emails. So when people are registering for the Commons, and right now I can't remember what it's called, but we, around that time when we wanted to launch a newsletter, we did start to use MailChimp for it, just because it was easier for us as our team to be able to access it. It is a very robust email sending platform. So we're using MailChimp.
That's fine. We used to use MailChimp ourselves, and then we switched over to Ghost. And I'm not going to take over the stream to evangelize about Ghost to you, but I can do that later if you want.
Please do. We are, for various reasons, like MailChimp does great for what we need, but there are also some drawbacks, as there are with, I feel like, every technology out there. Like, even probably Knowledge Commons. So definitely would love to hear about Ghost for sure.
Yeah, but not the focus of this stream. We've talked about that plenty of other times. No, God. That said, Ghost did derail my train of thought entirely. So I need to figure out where we were talking about the platform switch, and documentation is what I was going to ask about. Because I think that's something that we think about a lot too, is like where can we be proactive about documentation? Where can we make sure, oh gosh, we got to write down this use case beforehand. We know people are going to ask about it, versus a lot of, I think, our early documentation came out of essentially forum posts. People would ask questions and we would write up an answer and go, actually, you know what, let's put this somewhere centralized. Let's copy paste it, basically. So I guess if you can talk a little bit more about the process that you use for, you were talking about from a user perspective, navigating around, trying stuff out, what your documentation process looked like before and after, I guess.
Yeah, and that's a great question. So, one very huge help for our documentation process was the team at Northwestern that had also recently moved their repository from another platform to Invenio RDM. And I admit I am blanking out on what the name of that repository is. I believe it was specific to the medical school. You can probably find it, but their team, we had a very early meeting with them in this our Casey Works process, where they had showed us the guides that they had created for their users. And so that in our case was very helpful because we saw what sorts of things they were like showing users how to do, how to create collections, how to create an account. And even though their repository is a very different use case because it's limited to their university, it was helpful to see what these other guides look like. We also had a lot of guides already created for the core repository. And so again, like in the spirit of making sure users can adapt to change, it was like, okay, we need to look at what we have already and adapt these for Casey Works. And in certain cases, like we had to create those things from scratch because certain questions were not in the old repository. But then other ones, we could look at it and say, okay, this content, we just need to change it to have this new process.
Okay.
As also the person that does a lot of the work in our email inbox with users when they ask questions, I knew for a fact we get a lot of questions from users about how can they edit their metadata. So in the old system, what would happen is people would email and say, I uploaded this this syllabi and I need to change some of what's listed here because an author name has a typo or this date is incorrect. And what would happen in the old system is I would have to go in and manually just edit the form to edit and change it.
28,000 works, and you're doing that yourself?
Yes, I was pretty much doing myself with a little bit of
God.
assistance from the team. But yeah, as you can imagine, like people had to be involved in that. Now, we would, maybe we would not receive anywhere near like 30,000 of those a year. Like, I don't know, maybe like, let's say like for sake of argument, 50 or 60, but like you can imagine that still is something that takes someone on the team time to actually go in and make those changes. And our grad students had done that too, but like same thing, it's something that takes time. So I knew, for example, that was something we were going to get questions about. How do I edit my metadata? Because Casey Works allows users to do that. I don't have to intervene at all.
And that for end users, that's also a particularly nice sort of quality of life. You don't have to wait for somebody. You don't have to say, please make this change and I hope you do it right. Of course you would do it right, but like you're not dependent on somebody else.
Right, so. Exactly. Because and like as you can imagine, sometimes it would be like there's a typo in someone's name and they're presenting at a conference like I need this to be done, and we try to respond to all requests within about 24 hours, but obviously like if it's a Saturday or Sunday, like our team can't do that. Yeah. So that's a good one in that I knew that we needed to have documentation on that specifically. And so very early on when we were making a list of what guides we needed, it was like, we need to have one specifically on how to edit metadata. So that was very much like between the Northwestern guides, our existing documentation, and then just my knowledge of what questions we got about the repository were very much like the first step. And then after that, what you said about sort of what questions you got was another thing at the top of our mind, because we also know, like, again, you cannot anticipate everything. Like, people will ask other questions. And so we were very much like, let's make sure we have a solid base that has enough that people can find their way around. But then if we need to create more guides, we can always create another page on our support site. Like, we can always do that at a later date. And we have been very lucky, I would say, because we have not had a lot of situations like that, because most of the stuff we did anticipate, or the various people that have worked on the team and knew what user needs would be already had those things up. But, there's as we keep adding more features to the repository, I'm sure we'll get more of those requests, and then we can just kind of keep adding into the knowledge flow there.
Living document.
Exactly.
Just like the Knowledge Commons.
Yes, exactly. Like it's all alive. Like for sure.
Yeah. How many people are on your team, by the way?
Great question. So we have we have about, and I'm not going to count through everybody, but we have about 4 developers that work on our team. We have one that is specifically designated to Casey Works completely.
Your guy, yeah.
And then the others are sort of spread around multiple projects. Then on the community team, as I mentioned, I'm the main like user person, but then our project manager is sort of between the 2 teams. We have a UX researcher that also does some work with us. She's also on other projects at Michigan State as well, which is the case actually with a lot of people on our team. I'm one of the few that is like a full-time commons is all I do. But then we have, of course, our project director, some other developers that work within the team as well. So it's like at tops around 10 people, but then there are also other collaborators at the university that work with us too.
That's insane though. 10 people, a lot of whom are not full-time on the project. You have some other collaborators coming in, and you undertook this huge project, and it sounds like you guys nailed it.
I mean, I don't want to brag, but I do want to say—
You should brag!
Like,
brag! Go ahead!
We as a team were very collectively celebrating when we launched that public beta in November. And yeah, we had like a busy month of just kind of getting our hands into the new system, but we did not have 30,000 users in our email inbox screaming at us because it was broken. I really can't say enough good things about the way that team worked together to sort of fill in the gaps. And like, as you have alluded to, we are not a big team. You know, we wish we had 100 people that could do all these things individually. Instead, it was just a lot of collaboration and a lot of just really working hard to make it as smooth as possible. And we were very lucky that work paid off because the transition was comparatively very smooth, as opposed to like what we were all fearing, which is like, what if this thing, you know, what if the whole platform just goes down for weeks on end and we can't get it up? It was really good in that way.
The nightmare scenario. But no, you guys did an amazing job. And yeah, it feels a little bit late to be saying congratulations, but like, congrats.
Hey, I'll take it anytime. You know, we want, as discussed, you know, we want to hear the good things as opposed to users that are saying, hey, my whole thing is broken. Like, how dare you, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thanks.
Cool. Well, we've got a little bit of time left. I think now's the point where I go, are there any questions that you wish I'd asked you that, anything that from the experience or from the project that you want to talk about that, this is basically pilot, you forgot something or you didn't think of it.
Which I don't think that you forgot anything. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. But well, I guess the only thing that I should just add, which I already mentioned, is that the amount of so when we switched to Casey Works for our repository, not only did the amount of upload, like the max upload file size went way up. It was previously around 100 meg and now it's 500 gig. So you can imagine, again, like in the spirit of like,
Are you for real?
I'm for real. It's a huge improvement. And
oh my God.
And going along with that is the file types that people can add things. We used to have, you know, it was solid, the amount of file types, but now if you go on our support site, we have a list of recommended file types, but almost any kind of file will be accepted. Like there's not any major, we have recommendations, but in general, there's a lot more that people can do. So I would just, like the only other, my final comment that I like did not throw in yet, I think is just like, if people that are here are interested in adding things, like know that we really, in general, we want to share work out there. And so there's, if you have data sets, if you have things that you have been holding on and looking for a space online for them, that's a platform that has people that really care about sharing knowledge, like upload them or talk to us. Even you can email the inbox and say, hey, I saw you at the Reclaim session. Like I've been working on this cool project. Is Knowledge Commons a place for it? And our team will get in touch for sure.
I'm just realizing that I absolutely fell down on my duties as host and did not let you know that we have a chat. It's happening in Discord. And we already have Mark Corbett Wilson saying that he's already updated his Casey profile.
All right.
Get involved, get going.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I'm glad to hear it's happening live. Like,
Mhm.
this is that exactly. It's like a core deposit party or
Yeah.
Casey Works deposit party.
All right. Well, do you want to we've talked so much about socials. Do you want to talk about where people can find you guys? I'll put the URL for the main site back up on the screen, but you can also I can create banners basically as fast as I can type. So I can put up more banners as you say things.
I know. I'm like, okay, how many banners can you get up in the space of like
It's one at a time, but
5
let's
minutes?
I type fast, so let's go.
Well, I will acknowledge I don't have all of the URLs memorized, but I can say in general, if you're looking for us on social, you can find us on Twitter. If you search Knowledge Commons, you will see our page there. In general, I encourage you to find us more on Mastodon, and for that, our specific page on Mastodon is at hello@hcommons.social. Our server is hcommons.social. So if you go and search for hcommons.social, you can then also find the specific page that now we have on the screen. We are also on LinkedIn as Knowledge Commons, so you can search for us there. Knowledge Commons Works, which is the specific repository, is works.hcommons.org. Which I should also add for context. People may not know this, but we used to be Humanities Commons, which is why a lot of our URLs are still HCommons or something in that realm.
I've run into a different problem, which is that I'm only allowed to have 50 banners at a time, and we've run out of banners. I have to delete some banners real quick.
Oh,
no,
no.
not that banner. Let me delete it.
All right. So I guess, yeah, our Guinness World Record for like most banners in the space of 5 minutes failed.
It won't happen, but
no, we did our best. We did our best for sure. And then you can also find me. So I do use Mastodon for a personal page. So I think it's Babaklar at hcommons.social. I should know my own handle and I don't, but I think if you search for my name on Mastodon, you can find me or the rest of our team. And so and then the newsletter also, I should mention, if you want to sign up for that we talked about, if you go on our homepage on hcommons.org, there's a big subscribe to MailChimp block there. So that's the best way that you can sign up. And again, to promo it, you only get 1 email a month for us, maybe 2 if something really exciting is happening, but it will not be one of those spam emails that you get every day or every hour. We try to limit that. So definitely those are the best places to find us and find out more.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. This has been a ton of fun. This has been everything I hoped and more. Yeah, everyone go out, join the Knowledge Commons, follow them on Mastodon, follow Larissa, subscribe to the newsletter, go forth and share your work.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. This has been a blast.
Yeah, thank you for everything. Let me see. I usually don't have to play us out. So now I get to figure this out.
All right, let's go.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.